Okay, we can chill here for a bit, but we won't find it here. But another one of my personal favorite plants to talk about is wapato. So this is what wapato is here. So wapato is a really good starch food. Its nickname is like, I think it's like arrowhead something, just because like the leaves you can see are an arrowhead shape. But another nickname for it is duck potato. So wapato was a very important trading resource, especially in the Fraser Valley. They were masters of growing this plant. And so some good examples was in like 2016 when they were like trying to expand the highway near Chilliwack. They unearthed a massive wapato garden. So what they would do there with the Fraser River is they would dam it, create a rock kind of pool, have it just big enough where they could walk in there, because in like traditional wapato you'd have to like dive into the water and gather them. And so they essentially could create like an Olympic sized pool, plant the wapato there, and they can grow hundreds to thousands of pounds of this plant. And so essentially what they ended up doing is they would allow us access to the wapato gardens, and we would harvest the wapato there. And so it's just good starch to have. And then we'd give them land here where they can hunt, fish, gather the resources, or we'd kind of bring it to them. So it's pretty cool on that end. But when they unearthed this garden, they carbon dated it, and they found, because it's one of the closest thing to like the modern day monotone agriculture that we have. And they found that that garden was 4,000 years old. And so it's really cool, and it shows because previous, and especially they dug past the wapato gardens, and they found previous to them creating the wapato gardens, it was more of a barren and it was wasteland. It was really hard to live there. But once they started bringing in the wapato, then they started bringing in the ducks, which brought in more wildlife, their predators, and so they completely changed the landscape for the better. And so for me, I think that's really cool, and it shows especially like the modern Western lands when they first got here. A lot of the times they'd see like pretty much they would think it would be wildlife, but this stuff like this is a lot of what the Fraser Valley, Stolo, Katsi, Squamish nations, Sḳwx, and many other nations, we made the land and the forest better for us. So another good example of, have you guys heard the term like forest gardens? So forest gardens is very similar to kind of what is creating here, which is absolutely amazing. But we would take a small acre of land, we could burn it, and then afterwards, with all that new fertilization, we can go in, plant your cherry trees, your hazelnuts, your Indian plum, crab apples, your wild ginger, strawberries, raspberries, whatever you don't have an abundance of. We would just go into different parts of the forest and create a little garden for ourselves. And so it would be wild, but we made sure everything worked well with each other. So that was through a lot of trial and error. But if you make a proper forest garden, that could feed multiple generations. So speaking of it, we have wild or Indian plum here. So again, on the card, you can kind of see what it looks like. You can actually see they're starting to come out. You can see their green little berries. So Indian plum, I'm guessing the leaves, or we can kind of create a poultice, and it helps soothe sores. The bark, if we turn to a tea, is a laxative, but the fruit is vitamin C, helps prevent disease and inflammation, and just antibodies. So I'm super excited. This is my first time ever seeing it, but we got our hazelnut tree. There's the beaked hazelnut. So not a lot of people know that hazelnut is like naturally from around here. But yeah, obviously the nut's like super energy dense, good to eat. But the branch and the leaves, you can use into a tea. It helps treat like any heart or intestinal disorders. Okay, so yeah, some of my other favorites that we didn't find around here. So one of them, stinging nettle. Everyone's pretty aware of stinging nettle. So a lot of people shy away from it just because of the stinging sensation that you get. I learned about stinging nettle the fun way. We had a big patch of it in my backyard. Soccer ball went in there, I ran in, I ran out, and that was my first experience with it. Yeah, so never forgot. But so did you know stinging nettle, when they're actually very young, for me, I use about my knee height but one, it's a fresh green, and so you can, if you pinch the top of the leaf and then you roll it, you can actually eat it, and it tastes kind of like a cucumber. So it's a fresh green to have. It's like high in like vitamin C. It gives you iron, potassium. If you boil it and make it into a tea, it helps with any kind of like coughs or sore throats. But also any type of like rheumatoid arthritis or inflammation in the joints, you would purposely lash yourself with the stinging nettle, and the formic acid actually attacks that inflammation and helps numb the pain. So it'll give you different pain, but it'll be a better pain. Also, I am very clumsy. I bruise myself all the time. And so like if you get like a contusion level bruise or got a pretty bad bruise, it also, one, consuming it helps with circulation, but also if you purposely lash yourself, it'll help reduce the swelling and help heal your bruise a lot quicker. So stinging nettle is pretty cool on that end. If you have some that are like fully matured, and so around like September, October, they start to turn black and die, you could actually harvest the stems. I think you could do it either way, where you either soak it in the river overnight or you can dry it out. But either technique that you do, after you do that, you can open up the stems and you'll find a nice little fluffy fiber in there. Then you can take that fiber and roll it and turn it into string. And we'd actually create small intricate dip nets for like herring, hooligans when we had them around, or any type of small fish. Devil's Club, do you guys all know Devil's Club? I should have a photo of them in here. Devil's Club, everyone is warned about them. Even on my card, it is red, which means caution. So Devil's Club, they look like really big broadleaf maple leaves. They will grow berries on them. They look very close to huckleberries. Do not consume them. You will get sick, but to a black bear is actually some of their favorite berries to find and eat. But medicinally, there are two things we can do with the berries of the Devil's Club. One, we could squish them and rub them into our hair, and that was our conditioner to smooth out our hair. And it's actually a double whammy. Not only will it make your hair more smooth, it will also kill any mitchin, which is our word for head lice, and so we can wash them out. Some other uses for Devil's Club, what we could do is we'd actually want the cambium inner layer of the bark. That is absolutely insane medicine. It's one of the most researched plants. It has over, I think, like 130 different medicinal uses. It's antibacterial, it's antifungus, it helps with inflammation, it's a slight mood stabilizer, and it also helps greatly reduce your sugar, like blood sugar levels. Lee Joseph, she's an ethnobotanist with the Squamish Nation. She actually worked with the Canadian Diabetes Society, and they did a study, and people with like type 2 diabetes, if they had a healthy diet and drank the Devil's Club tea every single day, majority of them like self-cure themselves of type 2 diabetes. It's that good at helping with like blood sugar management. Traditionally, some other uses for them, the stem, similar to elderberry, the pith is very soft, and so you can push it through. You can sand it and turn it into beads, and we'd wear it as jewelry for like bracelets, earrings, necklaces, anything like that. And the beads represent spiritual protection. And so it's just not decorative, but it would help ward off any bad spirits. We could also burn the stem, add in a traditional like grease, which would be bear grease, salmon eggs, or any type of fish oil, and we'll form a black paint or pigment out of that. Some people, if you're like into crafts, we would have a family pattern, and some people could then take like porcupine quill and you can sit there and like tattoo yourself, and you'd put your like family pattern on your forearm, so if you forget it, you can like take a look and remember what your pattern was. And so it's pretty cool on that end. That was like one of the few tattoos, like if I were to get one, I would want to try to get like Devil's Club pigment. I think that'd be pretty cool. Some of the most important things with Devil's Club, one, usually we have a knowledge keeper there to do it, because one, the tallest Devil's Club is usually like the mother, plant, and so the entire root system is connected to that. So whenever I harvest, I always harvest from the kids. And when I do harvest, I will take the top bit, cut that off, and replant it, because it's a very finicky plant. It needs divots where the water can gather, so it needs high moisture. And so for me to be as sustainable as possible, that is some things that I try to do with them. One of my favorites, see if I can find it. Does anyone, if you're out in the forest, do you guys see the small ferns growing on the moss on some of the trees? That is licorice fern, or licorice root. So let me find the card. So licorice root is one of my all-time, it's literally my favorite plant whenever I'm out hiking, because one, it tastes like black licorice. So what I would do is follow the stem of the fern, dig into the roots, pull out the root system. I'll peel off all the small roots, put it back into the moss so it can regrow. And then I also try to have it lower, because one, deer really love to eat them, like deer and elk. So I try to have it as low as possible, especially where at my work. I harvest it so much, I try to have it low for the next few seasons. But it's antibacterial, so for handling any dead bodies, skinning, anything like that, we'd put it in our mouths. And it's antifungus, so that way we don't get sick when we're handling dead bodies. I also like to call it nature's gum. So if we're having a feast or celebration and we're waiting for guests, or the food isn't ready, you would take the licorice root, hand it out to everyone, and then as you suck on it, it tastes like black licorice, but it helps suppress your appetite, trick your body into thinking you're full, and then you just do small little nibbles to release a bit more juice until either A, all the guests have arrived, or B, the food is ready. Then you can spit out whatever you had left, and then you can start having your feast. So it's pretty cool on that end. The last use is it's a good preventative. The moment you feel that tingling sensation, like a sore throat is coming on, you grab the root, suck on it, swallow the juices, it'll coat your throat, numb it, and actually cut off that sore throat before it gets worse. But if it does get worse, it's not as good as a preventative. It won't help out on that end. But the main thing is it needs the moss on the trees, it needs the calcium. So usually I'll find them on broadleaf maples, sometimes we'll find them on rocks. And it's very rare because they don't get them often, but if it's super special, you can sometimes find it on a cedar tree. Traditionally, if you made it, you can make a tea out of it. And so if you made a tea out of the licorice root found on a cedar tree, it's supposed to be more stronger or more potent. And so back then we would make a quote unquote love potion, where you and your partner would drink it and it helped increase your guys' love for each other. Yeah, so this is the inner bark of the cedar tree. So me and my dad are, like I said, going out and harvesting this. And so this is what we'd be working with. Some of the most important things is when we harvest it, it's too sticky to work with right away. And so just like from feeling this has been cured for 1 to 2 years. And so that's just red cedar bark. Me and my dad have found out the fun way. Yellow cedar bark takes closer to 3 to 4 years. It's a softer bark, so it retains the water a lot longer. There are a few things we can do to speed up the process. We could take the bark and boil it for 3 days straight. Rotate the water every 3 to 4, more like 4 hours. The downside of doing that is cedar is also toxic. And so we're just making really toxic water. And so we have to dump it in a safe location so we don't damage the forest. So for the most part, we're fairly patient people. We're more than willing to wait a year. And so at home, we have a woodshed, which is tons of rolls of cedar bark in there. So this one, we'll soak in water. We cut up it into smaller pieces. We could weave it into hats, mats, baskets, bracelets, or some modern things. I like to make earrings on occasion. We do dresses and skirts. Those are our main sorts of clothes that we'd be wearing back then, or kind of like a cape. One of my favorite things with a cedar hat is because it retains moisture really well on hot days like today. I would take my cedar hat, dip it in the river, and then put it on, and it'll help keep me nice and cool throughout most of the day. Salmon berries are absolutely amazing. They're one of the first ones to bloom. They will attract your pollinators, so they're really good to have in the gardens. But do you guys know why they're called salmon berries? So the reason why they're called salmon berries, they're an indicator. So when we see the berries are ripe, it lets us know that the first run of Chinook, our spring salmon, is coming into our waters. So the moment we see that, we start fixing our dip nets, checking on our rock rears, and getting ready to catch our first run of salmon. But not only does it let us know that the salmon are coming, I would pay attention not just to that single bush, but I would start exploring the forest and look at all the salmonberry bushes and see how healthy they are. If you have a really healthy, if it's a really strong berry season, we're gonna have an amazing fishing season. But if it's a weak berry season, there's not a lot of good berries, we're gonna have a poor berry season. So then we're gonna do the bare minimum, but we know we have to go out and get a deer or elk or a bear. We're gonna get our protein from somewhere else because we're not gonna have a good salmon run. So it's the fertilization. So if a lot of salmon came up previous years, as they die and decompose, the nutrients goes into the berries and the forest around, and it takes them berries a few years to process that nutrients and turn it into berries. So it's a very similar life cycle to the salmon run. And so that is kind of how we could tell. And so that is like through hundreds and thousands of years of observing both the berries and the salmon run, and then we piece that together. But one of my favorite is modern science has caught up and reached that same point where they can track the nitrogen levels in the plants and see how previous runs were by the nitrogen. Yeah. So for me, that's really cool. Medicinally, the inner bark you could eat, and it's like weak Advil. It's a minor pain reliever. Or if you have a really gnarly toothache, I use this all the time with my grade 3s that I teach, is if I notice some of them have tooth pain, I'll peel off a bit of the bark, I'll tell them to chew it, and then pack it next to whichever tooth is sore, and it'll reduce the swelling and like get rid of that toothache in about 5 or 10 minutes. So it's pretty cool on that end. So Douglas firs, spring tips can also be used raw or into tea, same with the nettles, but it's like vitamin C, electrolytes, improves immunities, helps fight colds, and the spring tips are thirst quenchers. So last thing with the cedar, the dogwood trees, they're blooming their white flowers right now. And that lets us know, so I think it's like the Pacifics are blooming right now. That lets us know it's time to harvest red cedar bark. And then when the osiers, they bloom a little bit later, then that lets us know we can harvest bark from yellow cedar. So it's pretty cool on that end.
All right, we'd like to say thank you, Matthew, for sharing all your knowledge today with us. It's such a pleasure. There's a little plant in here for my garden. It's a bleeding heart in there as well. Has some other nice like local treats and things like that. So
amazing.
Just to say thank you so much.
Thank you.
And I hope everybody stays as well. We're going to have some Bannock jams made by my neighbor Marge here.
Amazing.
And Marge is going to actually introduce herself a little bit as well.
So my name is Marge, and I'm from the Carrier Nation. I'm a descendant of Chief Sďwx, and I'm a residential school survivor.
Nice.
She has her Bannock and her homemade jams here to share with us as well. If you'd like to take anything home, have a jam, she'll also have them for sale after the jam.
Nice.